Greetings! Welcome to the gutter. Everyone ends up here eventually. It is only a matter of time. My name is Aldous, and I will be your host this evening on this electronica symphony of strings and bass, digitized across what amounts to a series of tubes if you associate it as such. Our mutual travels on this intergalactic highway of information being simultaneously a journey of scorn and praise. Nothing you ever do will be enough, and everything you do is wrong. It is about right now that we remind you that both due to our passion of comics, that sitting down and reading a great comic, a great book, is much better use of your time than playing some silly video game or, more importantly, screaming about said video game. But without further ado, welcome and settle in. It's gonna be a good one. Each episode of The Gutter, I'd like to think, stands alone in an attempt by both me, your dutiful host, and my honored guests to delve into a topic that is at the heart of inspiration or wonderment to them in particular. Fortunately, as of yet, everything that they've picked has been something I'm familiar with. I do particularly dread the day they pick something I'm not. As an added bonus, you, the viewers, get to join us on this ride. In the process, hopefully developing a greater understanding of the affection of the piece in question, of the guest du jour, as well as being exposed in a polite and conscientious way, and hopefully following up on yourself a delightful piece of the grand epic tradition of storytelling, no matter the format. Praise from the rooftops that which you love, and let respond to those you hate with silent apathy. For that is the motto that we live here by in the gutter. My normally, my only guide in this journey, and the TA for your educational bona fides, if you will, is the erudite co-host JP. But he unfortunately will not be with us tonight. And because of that, you are all welcome to elicit a collective aw shucks in his place. However, I thought I had found somebody that was more than capable of filling those large shoes. And that was going to be Michael Ogden of the Embrace, Judex, Napoleon, and Rome historical streams on YouTube. In this magical place where knowledge can reach out across the ether and auditorially touch your soul and your precious gray matter, instilling seeds of ideas, concepts, and blissful new experiences. I could honestly think of no one I'd rather have filling in for JP other than Michael, despite his involvement in Bob the Human Xerox Machine Kane's fan club. Unfortunately, Michael was delayed, so he will not be able to join us. Or at least not right now. He might show up probably right at the last 5 minutes, like Corey Barton sliding into the chat right before I end the show. But turnabout being fair play and all, or at least as far as fair as things get down here in the gutter, I should also offer a little bit about the fine gentleman that is our guest this evening. Despite facing hardships as a youth, being raised by a pack of wild Nintendo cartridges that were clogged with dust, and not nary a soul to blow them from their gilded contacts in the wild, untamed lands of New England, that know only taxation and poor accents that butcher the grand English language, he rose to the attention of most within the publication world as well as the general readership. When Rex Mundi came out, first with Image Comics and then with Dark Horse. And although his published resume would go on and on, Rex Mundi, that particular tale of a broken Europe under the yoke of a tyrannical church, is still praised in hushed whispers across the land. An author, a creator, a father, and a general tour de force of nature with a substantial vocabulary, an excellent voice, great advice, and one of the quickest wits that I've come to know. He is indeed many things, but I just happen to call him my friend, Arvid Nelson. Welcome to the gutter, sir.
Aldous, thank you. Can we just end right there? That sounds.
So before before we get into, I do want to announce what the topic's going to be before I jump over to the chat. But I gotta say, man, in the history of the show, there, and we're on the. This is the 20th episode, if
Wow.
everybody can believe that. This will be the 20th installment of the Gutter.
Wow.
And in celebration of that, we have 3 whole people watching, which thank you so much. I appreciate all 3 of you. Probably both of them are Arvid, his wife, and his kids, I'm guessing. But we'll get to that chat here in a minute. But you chose something that is incredible for tonight. This is something it's near and dear to my heart. It's something that is a bit also out of left field. When you talk about Guy Davis, this is not the first thing that most people think of. And it's a little bit of a blast from the proverbial past. In the post-apocalyptic scene that was comics following their fall by the late 90s and early 2000s, good books, truly good books, were not an easy thing to come by.
Right.
And that being said, this is an era where some truly magnificent gems did emerge from. And one of them, I think you picked one of the shining stars from one of the smaller indie publications here with the Marquis by Guy Davis. And I mean, Guy Davis rose to attention probably by Baker Street, and we'll get into some of that stuff. But just as a prelude before we greet the chat, what led you to pick this particular work? What was it about, I guess, Guy in general, and then the Marquis specifically, that this moved you to the point you wanted to talk about it tonight?
Yeah, it's one of the few comics I've held on to. I'm trying to like simplify my life, and it's just as you pare away the things that cease to be meaningful to you, you really discover the stories in the comics that made an impact on you. I just think the Marquis. I could expatiate for the entire hour on the things that I think are magnificent and brilliant about it. I think it succeeds just spectacularly in so many ways, but it's not without flaws too. And I acknowledge the flaws because I think it actually only contributes to how great the work is. I like something that's flawed, and that's part of its charm for me. Yeah.
I got you there. I got you there for sure. And for those of you that had expatiate on your bingo card, congratulations. So we're going to turn over and greet the chat for just a moment before we really delve into this. And I feel like I use the phrase, really hit the meat and start chewing on it every episode. But that's kind of the truth of it. I mean, when you're talking about something like this and you really want to get down into it, that's just the nature of things. But tonight we had James from Broken Compass Comics. Always awesome to see him. It's fantastic. Usually he's not out and about this early in the evening, so awesome to see you, sir.
Yeah.
We have obviously Arvid both on the panel and in the chat. And then we've got General Piggy. Great to see you, sir. Fantastic for you to join us. Snuggy Jr., my brother from Saturday. Awesome to see you, my friend. We've got Arrogant Ape. I feel understood here on the Gutter.
Oh.
Well, I apologize for that, Arrogant Ape. We need to remedy that. I will try to start ignoring everything you say, and maybe I'll start delivering shows like 2 months late. Does that sound about right? That's how we respect people around these parts, right? And then Arrogant Ape says, hello, Piggy, and hello, Snuggy, and that's it for the chat. So, moving on. So, I mean, I guess I just want to talk a little bit about, as a lead-in, before we really get to the Marquis, just who Guy Davis was. I mean, he's just like every other artist. He's trying to break through, and he gets a chance with this book called Baker Street. And I never knew of Baker Street at the time. Baker Street was something I discovered well after it arrived on the scene. But I can certainly understand why when people opened up those first few books and they saw art like this. And if there's one thing you can say about Guy, it's his panel layouts, his inking, his penciling, it's just exquisite. This, if anything, is actually probably some of his weaker work. And this is very early in his career. And he did Baker Street, and he kind of had a little bit of attention around him. And he goes off and he does some other things, and eventually he settles in and does the Marquis for Image at first, if I believe that's correct. Let me check my notes.
And here's this Caliber. It
No, I'm
started with
sorry,
Caliber.
Caliber. Yep,
It
no, it
did.
was
Okay.
Caliber.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he and this Caliber guy is also from, much like myself, he hails from Michigan. Caliber was a small startup by Gary Reed, who was Michigander, wanted to build up comics, wanted to build his own. So he creates this little startup, and they'd release the Marquis. And this little tiny company releases something that just takes the world by storm. It's because pretty much of this book that Guy Davis's career takes off. He moves. I mean, Baker Street got him a lot of attention,
Yeah.
but I mean, and the the forward, I guess you would say, to the actual this graphic novel that we're actually referencing, which is the collected works of the Marquis, is written by Mike Mignola. Mike Mignola famously worked with Guy Davis on BRPD for several issues in the early 2000s. And those were just as groundbreaking as you would assume. And someday, hopefully, we will talk about those here.
Yeah.
But what Mike Mignola talks about specifically is that there's a sense of awe when you're looking at Guy's work. That there's a weight to it, and he does monsters and just inhuman so well. But at the same time, he can blend things exquisitely. I mean, when you look at his work on Sandman Mystery Theater, and that's a book that's set in the time period of the 30s and the 40s. I can't think of another artist, and Mignola even says the same thing, that could actually do that and make it look lived in. When you talk about Davis's work, and it's shown throughout the Marquis as well, he almost attacks the page. It looks like he's etching into it at times and attacking it. And then but it's got an elegant flow of it. So there's this slight aggressiveness, but an elegance to it. And he draws clothes that look rumpled and worn like nobody else I've ever seen. He can do some of the most terrifying monsters. And that was recognized within the last 10 years because Guillermo del Toro noticed his skill set. And Guy Davis designed several of the monsters that were in Pacific Rim. And sadly, because of that success, we will probably never see another comic from him
Right.
because he's making way too much money doing concept work
Right.
for Hollywood now, similar to what Trent Cayuga did following his success, and we probably won't ever see any more Creed.
Yeah.
And such is the way. But digging into the Marquis a little bit, I mean, from a 10,000-foot view, coming down into it before we start digging in, what's your takeaways here?
He does monsters really, really well. No one does it quite like him. I also think he deserves so much credit for the architecture that he does that thing. I've actually never read Baker Street, but just absolutely stunning, stunning architecture. That comes through very powerfully in that page from Baker Street. Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's one of my favorite things about the Marquis. I love the monsters. It's great, but what really sells me personally is the beautiful architecture and it's that kind of Napoleon III version of Paris. It's funny, Paris probably didn't look like that at that time. I know you're a student of history, you know that kind of the mansard roofs and the sort of creamy stone masonry came much later. But who cares? It doesn't matter. It looks so stunningly beautiful and so real and so tactile and so palpable. Yeah.
Right. Well, it's a novel set in
Yeah.
a different time.
Right.
It's in a world where the church has changed a little bit. There's a lot of similarities here, really, in the base ethos between Rex Mundi and the Marquis, kind
Yeah,
of.
for sure.
And it's a parallel world, and things. The Inquisition. It's not France. It's Vinsal
Right.
is the name of the land, but it in all respective purposes, it's France.
Yeah.
And faith and religion have strict laws. There's rules on life, there's rules on death, and souls from hell have escaped to our world, and they want to create havoc. They want to relish in sin. They want to murder. They want to possess people. They're looking to cause absolute chaos within civilization, and the Inquisition goes forth and tries to subjugate and kill and remove these demons.
Right.
And the Inquisitor in question finds himself blessed, maybe cursed, with the ability to actually see these demons and fight them. But as he begins this holy crusade, as it were, it's beautifully done on where the lines start to blur.
Yeah.
And it's I would say it becomes almost very introspective at a certain point. Commonly, one of the biggest complaint on this, everybody praises the artwork, but the biggest complaint is that the story just doesn't move fast enough. I've read this probably half a dozen times. I've never thought that it didn't move fast enough, but I'm curious. I think it fits into that strange place where it's not a book. It's not a book for all audiences by any means, but I think it's a book. I think it's a reader's reader. I think it's a. So let me rephrase this. Guy Davis is a reader's writer. And if you are a reader, you'll appreciate what Guy's doing, because a really good graphic novel, and Arvid, at any time, feel free to jump in here.
Thank you. Mm-hmm.
A really good writer that understands, especially an artist writer that understands pacing, he's slowly building it up. And yes, it's a slow build, but he's laying an extensive groundwork, and he keeps you engaged at all points of the story. I never feel like I'm distant. I never feel like I'm distracted. He's drawing me into the world and slowly closing the curtain around me until I'm in that theater of the mind, and the fire doors are closed, the lights go down, and then the show starts. And that's how I look at it.
Mm-hmm.
But I understand completely that other people might look at it a different way. And greetings to Lieutenant Hughes from the chat. I just wanted to flag him down. Thanks so much, man. Appreciate you showing up.
Let me just say, I think the metaphysics of this world are one of the most interesting things about it, because the way the story is presented, obviously you're explaining it the way you eventually come to have this understanding about the story, but the way there's a lot of ambiguity in the story, and there's this religion. I actually think this is one of the flaws. I think he's a little too hard on religion. If I had to guess, I think Guy Davis is probably an atheist, and that's fine. That's totally fine, obviously. But I think he's a little hard on this religion. It's just unrelentingly bad and evil. And there's not much alleviation of that. Despite, but there you go again. There's a lot of really interesting metaphysics at play. I mean, this is a very Calvinistic religion. It's very harsh. It's very grim. It's, they all believe in predetermination. There's no free will in this religion that they have. And I think he does a really good job of explaining the origins of the religion. Or actually, he's smart about what he doesn't explain. Because if you read closely the text, he says that this new religion of the saints, it's not so much a worship of God, it's a worship of saints. It's almost like God is too austere and too majestic for people to worship. So instead, they worship these saints. And the actual subject of God doesn't actually come up very much. I just think that's really, really interesting. Really, really interesting.
It's funny you say that. I've like I said, I've read this a half dozen times, and I recently reread it just for tonight. And I had the exact opposite takeaway.
Did you? Okay.
It's not an atheistic take. It's they have subverted the faith so much that
I see.
There is no it's not about God, it's about church now.
Yeah.
It's about the hierarchy, it's about the rules and the structure, the earthly construct that we have made, and we've forgotten what went on top. It's that. We're focused on the foundation, and we're not looking up at all. And one of the reasons I say it is there's a couple of points where it seems like people are looking down. It seems like the perspectives are always earthly, and they're not too often up. And that was how I took it. But yeah, I try not to predispose too much into what the author's conceptions are, for that sake. But I would like to share a couple of pages here. We've got and it's leading into the book. This is one of it's just a placeholding page. And in my opinion, this is not done nearly enough. When you talk about establishing a mood, this is the, I think, 6th page in the book, and you already know everything you need to know. You've
And
got
can I just say how brilliant that is? He's taking, the spire of a Gothic church, which is just a portion of a Gothic church, obviously, and he's multiplying it and doing something sort of radically new, but strangely familiar at the same time with that one architectural detail. It's just absolutely stunning.
yeah,
Absolutely
no, and
stunning.
this is this is a great
Mm,
example right off the bat before the book even starts that guy understands what he's doing.
right.
His use of negative space and his fact that he's making it all black is setting the tone, and there's more black than white. It dominates the image. And right in the focal point is that cross. And so it's setting the tone that you know exactly what you're getting. And then as you delve in of the danse macabre, you
And I think it's actually implied more that it's a hilt of a sword than a cross, which I,
oh
I
really?
love that. Yeah, if you look at it closely, it's the what's the name of the saint that everyone worships, but the is depicted with a sword held upside down like that.
Oh
So
yeah. Oh, I
mhm,
hadn't caught that. That's a good call,
yeah,
man.
but it's another really interesting twist he takes. He takes something which he takes like a cruciform. Obviously, there it looks more like a cross, but he takes that cruciform, which is the cruciform. He takes a cross, which is obviously associated with Christianity, and he does something slightly but radically different with it. I just absolutely love that.
No, for sure. And then so we start off with just something that's this is just a great establishing page again, and this is a perfect example of what I was talking about when it looks like Guy, he just attacks the page.
Yeah,
The page is fantastic, and it's very simple. There's not it if you start looking at it, it's really simple in its layout and its construct. And he's just breaking up that image into four panels, and it's the age of what that was the age of misery.
right.
And so we know the tone, and we've got our character down below. And then as you go through, again, it's just it's not a book. It's definitely not a Bendis book. It's not verbose, but it's also of a different age. And what you're seeing is just some exceptional expositional storytelling, and it's structured in such a way that essence, feel, and tone is all captivated, and it's all done through the art. And Guy Davis understands his faces are just awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. He does emotion really, really well. I've learned this the hard way. It's one of the most difficult things for an artist to do. He does people ex- expressions of extreme emotion. He just nails it every single time. Very difficult to do.
Absolutely. So you get several pages of that, and then you get some fight sequences. And I mean, we're multiple pages into the book, and outside of that initial narration, there's been nothing. And it's okay. And then we get a little bit of story, and then we move into part one. And again, we see the same motif that we used at the beginning again to set that tone. And this is a repeating pattern in the book that we're going to establish mood and tone before we move into sequences.
Right.
And
If I
it's
just
just
say here, apparently his pages, because he did this all with natural media, whatever you want to call it, like contact paper and Zipatone. So I've never seen one of his pages, but they're actually physically heavy because they have so much contact film and Zipatone on
oh, I'd
them.
believe it, man.
Yeah, yeah, they're almost like three-dimensional apparently. So yeah, but that's all natural media. That's all him applying uh, Zipatone. I mean, boy, nobody does Zipatone like he does. I mean, it's awesome.
Well, it's an art in and of
Yeah,
itself.
absolutely.
It and and I recently I was talking with JP actually last week about this, about what Zipatone is, and just for the sake of anybody that doesn't know, if you don't know what Zipatone, I guess Arvid, you've been in the industry. Why don't you explain a little bit?
Yeah, it's just called contact film. That's how you get those little dots. It's obviously it's no one, practically nobody uses actual physical Zipatone anymore, but it's a sticker. It's like a sticker, and it has the little dot patterns on it. You see it a lot in Japanese animation, especially, but a lot of Western artists use it too. And it's pretty simple. You cut it out with an X-Acto knife, you stick it on the page, and it's as simple as that. You get different beautiful gradients. You can get different patterns and different densities of dots, and it's a way to get grayscale into a black and white image.
No,
And
for sure.
yeah, I don't think anybody does it better than Guy Davis. Just
No, and
Mm.
occasionally, I do know Guy will do this, and you can get sheets of Zipatone that you can just lay on a page and then ink roll over the top of. And
Oh.
I do know he's done that along with, I know there's a couple other guys that have
Hmm.
done that, where it's basically just a fine mesh film and you lay it on the page and you tape off where you don't want it and you just roll the ink on.
Oh, okay.
So I've seen Dave McKean do that in
Hmm.
some videos where McKean's working on his
Okay.
stuff, where he'll lay a mesh across and just roll heavy ink on, and he lays it on super thick,
Hmm.
just for that textured effect that you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Okay.
again,
Let me just, if you don't mind, one of the things if you looked at that opening sequence, which is mostly wordless, there's lots of vegetation and wildlife, and you never see a single plant ever again. There's nothing green ever again that you ever see ever again in the story. If you notice that the world is very beautiful, but this goes back to what you're saying about how people have become corrupt or lost their way. This is the world of the Marquis. It's a very beautiful world, but it's also sterile and and lifeless. And it's a subtle thing that's hard to miss, but it's just another really brilliant choice that Guy Davis made.
no, it's exactly the point. It's we are in the
Yeah,
world of the man constructed,
right. Yeah.
and while it is built within God's realm of the religion of however you want to say it. It's not, I mean, I'm not trying to bring religion into it, but I mean, that's a focal point. Their religion is a focal point of the book.
Right.
And it's their God has built the world, but they're living in a man-made city, and they're everything about it from the beginning intro out in is they're isolated from it.
Right.
So that's why I don't think it's an atheistic tale. I think it's about a separate. I think it's a separation from your creator's tale.
Well, I
But
think it is at the very least. It's very, in my opinion, it's highly critical of organized religion, and I get it, but I don't think that it's alleviated by any nuance, and it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be, but
no, it's
yeah.
that there's definitely a heavy hand
Mhm.
metaphorically at work. He's not trying to be shy at all
Yeah.
with
Right.
what
Right.
he's saying.
Right.
But I mean, again, this is an excellent page that highlights what you were talking about with Guy's attention to detail on the architecture. And if I could just take a moment, and this is what I love about Guy right here is this street lamp is just gorgeous. He doesn't need to, but he spends the time to actually like we were just talking about the zipatone. There's zipatone on the gilding
Right.
of the base, and it's small details like that that you're going to see throughout this entire book. And if you go and read the reviews or any of the critical analysis of this book, the one thing you will consistently see is the art is beautiful, comma, but like nobody says that this is poorly drawn. Nobody says that they didn't like the art.
Right.
Everybody praises it, but everybody's critiques start with, and they always have to set the table and say the art's great, but
Right.
and it's fantastic to see that because you see that throughout from here on out in Guy Davis's career. You'll see that critique always start with, well, it wasn't the art, it was something else
Right.
that always bothers them. And it shows you that this is a man at the top of his game, as, again, shown by the fact that he's not doing comics anymore. He's been
Mhm.
pulled into the concept art world.
Right. Um,
And again, just
man,
fantastic. The faces,
unbelievable.
man. Just the faces are so good.
He also he conjures light so well with Zipatone. Very hard to do on the mask with the big nose. Let's see, one, two, three. On the fourth panel there, you really
Yep.
get the sense of the light coming up underneath the character and the underlighting. Very difficult to do with Zipatone, and he makes it look so natural. Just
Yeah.
stunning.
Yeah, I think the on this particular page, on page 22, the best panel is actually the last panel.
Yes.
And one of the reasons why it's the best panel is because it's very hard to show that character brooding over a cityscape and not make it immediately evoke Batman.
Yeah, that's right.
And to call back to the previously mentioned Bob Kane, who our dear Michael Ogan is the president of the Human Xerox Machine, Kane's fan club. Um, one of the things that Kane did in the early Batman books, in addition to steal from the Shadow Partners in Peril for the first book, was also he went back to Hal Foster's Tarzan book or comic strips and stole directly lifted individual Tarzan poses of Batman, only for Batman. So when you see Batman in those early books, or even you look at a Frank Miller book today where he's arcing back to what Bob Kane did in those early
Yeah.
Batman books, and Batman is sitting on the edge of a building brooding over the city. If you go back and look at Hal Foster's Tarzans, and we talked about this on the show with Odin Dasco when we went over Prince Valiant and Hal Foster, Bob Kane he lifted those scenes, and so that those famous scenes of Batman brooding over the city are actually Tarzan brooding over the jungle.
That is
And
so
it's
funny.
it's
Is that a
just
fact? That
yeah,
so
it is.
funny.
Yeah, it's a little
Wow.
bit of history repeating there. So
Wow.
when you're seeing this is Guy understanding whether he understands that fact or not. He's doing something different, and he's creating a different pose. You don't see his head, which is important. When you're doing a character like he's doing here, you don't want to personalize him. He's present, but
Yes.
he's not. The reader isn't directly associating with him, because if you can see a face, you're going to associate with a face. He doesn't have a face for a perfect reason, and part of that reason is you don't want somebody to associate with him. In addition to that, there's a little artistic trick here that I want to mention, and that's really, really strong panel layout. Because if you carry that character in the bottom panel's head up, where do you go? You go immediately into the lit flame. And so it's a subtle suggestion of what that character is that he's fire. He's hot. He's an exterminating source of light, but at the same time he's consuming. It's metaphorical, yes. Am I reaching too far? Arguably. I've got some notes on what Guy has said across numerous interviews, so you're welcome to challenge me on that in the comments of this video. But I'm
No, and
saying
I don't think so. All I think you're dead on there. Absolutely dead on. Yeah.
But no, and so this is something that, and this is one of the things that I like to talk about is when you're talking about panel layout, why are you putting that in a panel? Well, there's no dialogue in that panel, so there's no reason for that panel to be there unless it's there for an intentional storytelling method, which it's just a match lighting a lantern. As an editor, I'm going to be asking, why? Why are you including this? If you look at the bottom panel, no face, shoulders up. Why? It's a suggestion. It's the extension of his being, is he is the flame. So just something to look at when you're looking at a panel and you're looking at a page. Keep these kind of things in mind, because artists do take these things into account. Good artists
Definitely.
take them into account.
Let me just say another thing about Guy Davis is, wow, he works hard on his pages. He does not cut corners ever.
No,
Ever.
and whether it's Baker Street, which is early in his career,
Right.
or whether it's Sandman Mystery Theater, whether it's Sandman, because he was on Sandman for a little while, or whether it's the Marquis, every page is something that is absolutely beautiful, and you feel like you could purchase one and hang it in your home and you would have exquisite art. The detail level, you never get tired of looking at his pages. That is for certain.
Right. No one
And,
does texture like him too. I mean, he's able to evoke with just a few squiggly lines. He can evoke grass. He can evoke sort of, Baroque sculpture. He can evoke lace or he does amazing things with texture. Look at the character at the very top, the character in the foremost, that lacy fringe around. It's just a bunch of squiggly lines. And how does he do it? It just unmistakably has the texture of lace. It's so brilliantly executed.
No, he certainly is fantastic. We have been joined by the Admiralty. Admiral Wackass has joined the chat. Oh, great to see you, man. Thanks for stopping by.
Yeah.
And Snuggy Jr. says, if it ain't Baroque, don't fix it. Wow.
Very nice.
That's thank you, Snuggy. Mm-hmm. But yeah, and and this continues. We just get one step after the other, and I really wish Micah was here, man, because It is so evident at times in this book that there is a little bit of a nod being done to the old 1916 silent film of Judex, and it kills me that
Oh,
Michael's not
wow.
here
Is that a
to
fact?
talk
Really?
about it because
Okay.
it's not quite scene for scene, but there's some real strong suggestions that Guy might have been playing a little fast and loose with some references. And
Uh,
greetings to Antoine Dennison, man. Great to see you, dude. Been a while.
welcome. Yeah. Um, okay. Again, okay. This is what? This is a 5-panel page. Again,
The,
this is one of the most amazing things about Guy Davis. One of my standard things is you can't have too many panels in a page. It gets too busy. He'll do like 5, 7, 8 panels in a page, and make it feel like it's a 3-panel page. I mean, a page like this is just amazing. Every single panel, like you said, it's so well laid out, and the composition and the blocking is so well done too. I mean, it's just I don't know anyone who gets away with doing such dense pages and does it as brilliantly as he does. So the amount of time and care he puts into every page, just absolutely stunning.
no, it is, and I think one of the things about this page that's so amazing is that actually it's what I would consider inverted.
Mm-hmm.
Normally, you don't
That's
want
right.
to start off
Right.
on a close-up shot
Yep.
and then extend out to a long-range shot.
Right.
You'd want to do the inverse because that's more emotionally investing. Guy's choosing to do the opposite. Why? Because he does not want you to associate with his main character.
Right.
He wants you to be a passive viewer in this story. He doesn't want you to associate with that person. You are not just. And again, we cut the character's head off in the previous scene so you don't associate. Now we're doing the exact thing that you wanted. It's the
Right.
direct inverse. And you'll see Guy doing this throughout the book. The last thing he wants you to do as the reader is associate with the main character.
Right.
This is something that's a really big risk. It can either work magically like it does here, or it can backfire on you completely. It all depends on how the book is laid out and written.
Right.
I would assume Guy spent a lot of time with his editors on making sure that this was paced correctly and worked. But man, I love this panel because it breaks the rules. And sometimes, and this is where this isn't his first rodeo. This isn't his first book. He's an experienced comic book artist at this point. He understands the quote unquote rules, and that's why he's allowed to break them because he understands their importance. And more importantly, what you get is a beautiful understanding of how to change a scene when you get to this.
Yeah.
Because now we have separated away from
Uh,
the man and we
do you
are
mind going
looking at
back
the
for?
scene.
Yeah.
No,
Do you mind going
absolutely.
back? Thank you. What I love about here, creating mystery with the character's eyes, because you see the eyes for the first time behind the mask, you think, who's behind the mask? It's so brilliantly done. Also, I'm not a big fan of, like you said, he's breaking the rules and getting away with it because he knows the rules. He's breaking it on purpose, just like I think, just like you said, he's trying to create distance from you with the character, creates a sense of vertigo also, but he knows what he's doing. I think silent panels, silent pages, I always make me really, really nervous when I see silent pages. When I reread the Marquis, this is a perfect example of a silent page that really works beautifully and brilliantly. So he shouldn't be getting away with this stuff, but he is. Yeah.
Well, up to this point, he spent a lot of time. We really haven't touched it, but I mean, we're on a time limit, so I don't want to
Mhm.
go. We could pour
Yeah.
over hours on each page,
I
but
know, really.
you're moving through at a pretty good click because there's not been a whole lot of text to this point. So I mean, you're going to absorb the page and then flip it, absorb the page and then flip it.
Right.
So you're not, as a general reader, your first time through, you're not going to be spending an inordinate amount of time. So it's
Yeah.
important for that instantaneous psychological effect. And in film, you talk a lot about that you don't want to dwell on a shot unless you want emotion. Man, if you're gonna open a film on a sunrise and you're gonna close on a sunset because that psychologically makes sense to the
Mhm.
mind. Similar here, but he's violating that and he's
Right.
pushing you away. But the important part is he pushes you away from the character, and then he does something like this,
Yeah.
which shows you what is important. Because
Right.
this is about religion, this is about faith, and we're looking up. And this is again, go back. Where are we looking? Well, on the previous page, we're looking down. Talked a little bit about this in the intro.
Yeah.
We're looking down a lot in this book. Throughout the entire graphic novel, we look down a lot because it's not about
That's a great
God.
point. I hadn't realized that. That's a great point. I hadn't even realized that. You're absolutely right.
But here we look up. And we look up because he's in reverence to this. He's in reverence to this. And again, to your point earlier about Guy and his attention to architecture,
I know.
this this is amazing. When you talk about detail, that curved ceiling, it seems simple,
Yeah.
but it's amazing. I feel like I use the word exquisite too much, but
No,
it's
but
just
that's Guy Davis for you. I love the checkerboard pattern on the floor. I just everything about this is just so stunning. Yeah,
and so and
yeah.
then you get now we're into some meat. Now you're getting some dialogue, and there's a lot. There's a lot of people out there that are going to say, oh, "Well, that's way too wordy." No, it's not, and here's why it's not. Because up to this point, what Guy has done is he's brought you A into the world, B distanced you from the character but made sure that you're invested in what's going on, and now he's offering some exposition. So you're engaged. So this isn't it's not too heavy. Okay? It's not like a Bendis page where there's a static image and just bubbles all around it.
Yeah.
This progresses as a book should. If anything, this is a throwback to the 50s and the 60s when you used to not be afraid to put some letters on a page. Could it be cut down? Maybe. But I don't, far be it from me to criticize the words on a page that have been, in publication for almost 20 years and have yet to not be reprinted. I mean, this thing is still selling and selling well. So, take into account what works and look at why it works instead of offering a blank criticism or judging something on a single screenshot of a book. But so we offer some explanation. We're doing some exposition.
Do you mind if I jump in? Because there's
go ahead,
a little
man.
bit, a little bit on the lettering. This is lettered by Vince Locke, who's a great artist in his own right. Vince Locke is actually most famous, believe it or not, for doing the album covers for Cannibal Corpse, the death metal band.
Oh no! Shit.
So yeah, I I respect everything you're saying. All this, I think this is when the story starts to break down. And don't get me wrong, this is one of my favorite comics in the world. Like I said, I think it decedes almost because of its flaws, but not despite its flaws.
Really, you think this is where it breaks down?
I do. I think.
Oh man, I think it breaks down later.
Do you really? Okay. Well, I look forward to hearing yours. Yeah, or maybe it starts to break down here. I feel like I am, and again, I am a big Guy Davis fan. I think this is a brilliant story. It's a brilliantly constructed world. I think in the dialogue is where this story really, really starts to lose me. And I think that the lettering is again, and I love Vince Locke too. I love Cannibal Corpse. I'm nuts about Cannibal Corpse. I'm nuts about his art for Cannibal Corpse. I just think that the letter forms are really hard to read. And it does not make the process of sifting through the language any easier. I think the language itself, it's really stilted and kind of formal and archaic in a way that just does not help get the point across about what he's saying. So that would be my first big thing.
It's the phrasing and the word choice is definitely It's a 20th century attempt to mimic 18th century verbiage.
Right. Exactly.
And it is done clumsily. It's not to the point of like, I'm going to add to everything, like verily this and verily that.
Right.
It's not to that point, but it feels that way. It feels like it's just a little too that he's just spoon feeding it to you a little heavy.
Right. Exactly.
And it probably could be lightened up a little bit better.
Yeah.
One of the things at this particular time that you would see is you'd see a lot of. There would be no illusion in language when two men are speaking. If you wanted to make an illusion, you would make a quote. Because if you were of high society, if you were an educated man, you would be well read, and you would be well read in three things. You would be well read in the classics of the Greek, you would be well read in Shakespeare, and you would be well read in the Bible. So there is no reason, there is no situation where you couldn't make an allusion to another educated man because your reading pool is so. Think of it this way, chat. now, and I've talked a little bit about this, our social parlance is in movie quotes. So if you're going to make a quote about, um, hey, this thing that I should obviously say yes to happened. If you're a kid that was, grew up on Ghostbusters, you're going to say, when someone asks you if you are a god, you answer yes.
Right.
Everybody that's seen the movie understands what your inflection is.
Right.
But we have reached a point where if you haven't seen that movie, you don't get it. Well, this book takes place in a time where that would not happen. Either you were well read
Right.
and of their level and understood their reference, or you were proving yourself that you were not on their level because you didn't understand the reference. The pool of reference was much smaller. And so you would see not heavy-handed metaphor or long allusion made. You would just see them quote a parable, or or see it as a passing statement, such as like oh, as the Samaritan, because that brings up the whole Samaritan parable, and you would see that done in language. If you look at and really the last time you see a great example of this is the American Civil War, and I should rephrase that.
Mm-hmm.
The last time you see a great example of this in the American English language is the American Civil War. You do see it a little bit in some of the
Yeah.
letters home from the British troops that are in the Crimea.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know German, but I'm sure you'd see the same thing from the German or the French troops in the
Mm-hmm.
Franco-Prussian War. But it's a lingering 19th century thing. Moving into the
That's right.
20th century, you don't see this as much in World War One letters home.
Mm-hmm.
It's a changed culture. You're starting to see them reference different things. You're starting to see them reference newspaper articles and more mythology and
Mm-hmm.
pop culture that came out of the Wild West in
Right.
World War One. But at this time, you're still going to get the big three: Greek, Latin classics, Shakespeare, and the Bible. So yes, to your point, Arvid, absolutely. They could thin this down and
Mm-hmm.
it could be definitely more period correct. I still like it. It still
Yeah.
works for me. This it falls apart, not falls apart.
Uh,
I have issues a little bit
yeah.
later. I feel like
Okay.
I'm talking too much. So go ahead.
Mhm. Yeah. No, I just want to say, I again, big fan. This is one of my favorite comics. It's one of the things I hold on to. I know we're all sophisticated, intelligent, handsome, wonderful gentlemen here, so we can have more than one thought in our heads at the same time. And I think for all the successes, like I said before, this is one of its biggest failings is the dialogue. I think you just I don't think this is a good idea. Just like dump trucking in dialogue, exposition through dialogue. He's just the Marquis is alone. He's a very solitary character that presents major problems for you as a storyteller. How do you get across information about who he is? There are ways, of course, to do that, but I don't think having him talking to a statue for pages and pages on end in this really prolix dialogue, it is just not successful. And this is just not a good way to introduce exposition to a reader. And I would have put the Marquis at, frankly, it's like maybe not Exhibit A, but it's a good example of like why you just kind of shouldn't do it.
Right. And to your point, this does go on a little long.
Yeah.
It goes on for this is all still exposition. He's still talking. They've recanted with some action shots, which this helps. This is good. You're breaking up the exposition. You're building up that background by showing action, and you should show action. I do have I hate action that bridges the spine, and in
Yes,
this
I do.
case,
Thank you. Thank you. Absolutely.
and I
Never
don't
works.
like it
Yeah.
when it does this. I don't think it ever works. It should never be done. It's
Totally
yes,
agree.
he's violated some rules, but some rules just don't break.
That's right.
And
Exactly.
this
Hmm.
is that happens to be one of them. This page, I love this page. I think it's a good action sequence. Again, it's that use of zipatone. It's the black and the white and the gray. He
Yeah.
understands his shades. I love the fact that his hero is draped in black always, and all the villains are always draped in a shade of gray because that gets really important later
Yeah.
on. And based off of where we're at in the show, we're probably not going to get to it. So there might have to be a part two of this
That'd be
particular
great.
episode. But again, we're still into him talking to the statue. If you were keeping notes, and again, we're still into action, but it's
Yeah.
engaging and it's flowing.
It
Um,
is. If I
if
could
you
just, it's just okay. But like now we're flashing back, and he's. I think flashbacks are dangerous too. It can work, but I think we're running into these are some of the weaker parts of the book, and not to mention he keeps. This is what's so funny about the Marquis because he does so much successful exposition smuggling as well. So much of the exposition is so well done, but so much of it is done in this really sort of ham-fisted and kind of clumsy way as well. It's one of the most infuriating things about the Marquis for me. And this isn't the first scene like this. Like every chapter has these sequences of him just like talking to a statue, and he keeps on repeating the same things. I think the dialogue is too metaphysical. It's too philosophical. He keeps repeating the same philosophical things,
right,
and
no,
he
and
keeps having the same problems, and he's doubting his faith. I'm like, okay, you're doubting your faith, Marquis, but come on, man, come on.
right, and that's where it breaks down for me is
Okay,
the
okay,
second time that he goes through all
right.
this because we get
That's right.
this,
Yes,
and I'm okay with this.
yes,
It's
yes.
the next time we get this.
Mm-hmm.
Then it's like, okay, no.
Right.
You've already
Right.
done
Yeah.
this.
Right.
Move on.
Right.
And don't do the flashback thing again.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
and so that's what you get is we get this and then we move in and then this.
Yeah. Oh God, I'm sorry. That's game
this
over. Yeah.
no
You can't
this
do that.
this is where it
Can't do
gets
that.
it's
Yeah.
starting to get a little heavy. It's still
Yeah.
okay. This is we're winding down.
Yeah.
We're drifting back.
But,
Again, you'll notice every page we've looked at, it's either a level shot or a down shot
That's right.
until this last panel. Then we're looking up. And we're looking up. We're talking about, again, the positive things. We're changing the context. We're going to the ministry oversees us all. And you're looking up, but what's in the foreground? What's obscuring your view of quote unquote God, the church? And so it gets back to that metaphysical. You can't see God because the church is in the way.
that is so interesting.
And so that's where I think Guy's talking a lot about.
Okay.
It is definitely a critique on organized religion, but I
Yeah.
think it goes beyond that. I think it's
Okay.
but I mean, also with my particular panache for individualism,
Yeah.
I view it as the church in here is a representation of the state.
Okay.
And it's any obstruction. You're trying to reach out for that absolute freedom of seeing the sky, and the state is overarching over you. And in this case, it's a religious state, but I don't think it matters. It's just any instance of that, and they're like jail bars, right? You're looking out through a prison window, and it's just crosses.
Yeah.
Oh, because it makes it flowery and nice. Well, no, it's still barring your view.
Right. But I'll buy that for $1. That actually makes a lot of sense to me. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then I wanted to spend a little bit of time on this page. I had this one marked off. Again, you just see Guy's excellent attention to architecture. And here, earlier I said I didn't really have a problem with the lettering when you were criticizing it. Here I do.
Okay.
This is where I start having issues with the lettering because it's the blocks don't flow well.
That's right.
The panel construction, it's what happens on this page is you go panel 1, panel 2, panel 3, and then where do I go?
No,
do
exactly.
I go
Yep.
do I go vertical down or do I go across to panel 5? I don't know where my eye goes.
Right.
I'm assuming because when I get down to panel 3's dialogue breaks the gutter for panel 4 that I follow that. My problem is there's nothing to bring my eye back to panel 5.
Right.
And I end up at a dead end point. And what that does is we've done really good flow up till now for the most part, and now we're hitting this point where it starts to break down for me in that I'm losing interest in not interest in the book, but attentive to the book. It's not engaging me. Yeah. And greetings to Steve, that Star Wars boy, the owner of the greatest Star Wars channel ever.
Excellent. Okay, can I This is one of the greatest plot. It's almost it's not it doesn't really qualify as a plot twist. It's almost like a metaphysical twist. You see another side of this religion. It almost reminds you of like these like Shia cults where they engage in all kinds of depravity because they're trying to bring back the Mahdi or whatever. At any rate, you see, whoa, there's a real dark side to this religion. He's going to confession, and you think, okay, that means he's going to go to a priest and confess his sins. But in this world and in this religion, they have space, and it's never explained, which is just awesome. People say show, don't tell. And I think neither show nor tell. And this is a perfect example of the exposition working beautifully and brilliantly. They have this weird tradition in this religion, or this weird kind of like safety valve where you can go to this confession and indulge in all kinds of sinful activities. And it's seen as a way of like purifying it. You get the sin out of it. And this is what it helps to protect you from the influence of demons and devils who can possess you otherwise. And it's just, it is such a striking departure from this austere Calvinist Christian faith. And I love it. This is one of the best moments in the book, I think.
No, and I think the great part about this is like I just said, the previous page kind of is where I started to, I'm stepping away, and then he immediately brings me back.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And I see this throughout the book where consistently and I get it. Again, as I said in the reviews, you're going to see the art is great, but people have a lot of issues with this. Mm-hmm. But the one thing they constantly say is they read it. They didn't.
That's right.
They didn't stop reading it at a certain point. Because what it does is it almost pushes you away, and then right about the time you're ready to close it, it'll grab you by the lapel and pull you right back in. And that's what this page does: is it pulls you right back in, and it immerses you right back into the story. Now, sadly, he does push you right back out.
I know. That's right. That's right.
So it's a constant push-pull with this book once you get into the meat of it. I mean, you're 37, 38 pages in, and you want to kind of break away because it starts getting a little rough. And again, this is that point where I feel it probably could have been slimmed down a little bit. But Arvid, we are hitting our magical hour mark, and I do want to ask you a question, my friend. We can keep on going through a couple of pages here for a little bit, or we can turn and we can talk a little bit about what you've got going on. Either way, I'm good with. It's entirely up to you.
Oh my God, we can talk about me. That sounds great. Well, yeah, what's going on? You know, I just ever so briefly. Thank you, Aldous. By the way, thank you for having me on. I love your Napoleon series. I don't know if anyone in the chat has been following that, but it is so well done. I think you and Michael have such great rapport. You are both so knowledgeable. You're not just knowledgeable. You have that. It's like true sophistication. I can tell both of you are really genuinely passionate about military history, about Napoleonic military history in particular. So everyone, please check out Vive l'Empereur.
Oh, no, don't.
It is magnifique.
Don't promote that. But,
okay.
We're talking comics tonight.
Okay. Man. So we're talking comics tonight. So just to promote myself, I'm working with, ever so briefly, I'm working with a phenomenally talented artist in Malaysia. His name is Oren. I am just, I wake up and go to bed thanking the fates, God, every day that I'm working with him. And I can't wait to share it with everybody. We're going to be launching it next March. We're taking this very seriously. I think we want to produce something on time, and we want to get it out to people when we say that we're going to get it out to people. We're for real, and we're taking this seriously. We're taking readers very seriously. So we're taking our time to make sure that we have the production done so that we can deliver it to readers on a consistent basis.
Well, I think with your background, I mean, because like I said, I mean, Rex Mundi, if anybody in the chat if you don't own Rex Mundi, by all means, read it. It is an absolutely fantastic read. And we talked a little bit about this in the pre-show. I'm a huge Sandman Mystery Theater fan, which Guy Davis did the art for. He lives in my state. He's actually not even that far away from me, and I've often dreamed of taking my entire collection and getting them to have autographed, because it is one of my favorite comic runs of all time between Matt Wagner writing and Guy Davis's beautiful
Yeah,
art. But you actually had an issue of Rex Mundi
that's right.
was drawn by Guy Davis.
That's right.
And so I bow to you, sir.
Yeah.
I've never had Guy Davis draw my writing.
Right.
So you win by default on that
Right.
one.
Let me just say, all the faults that I'm bringing up with Marquis are things that I have done many, many times over. So I'm not above these things either. Rex Mundi, it was a, I poured it. It was the best I could do. I had something to say, and I think I said it. It is definitely has pretty glaring faults and flaws with it
Well,
too.
well,
So
let me stop you there, man. I mean, Rex Mundi is a lot of fun. Are there
thank you.
problems? Yes. But you know what?
Mhm.
Here's the thing. Anybody that owns the Fourth World, complete run of the Fourth World by Jack Kirby, Jack the King Kirby. And again, for those of you that are not familiar or regular watchers of the Gutter, I subscribe to the Steranko school that there are three pillars of Western comics. Western comics meaning American comics. And those three pillars are Wallace Wood, Joe Kubert, and Jack Kirby.
Mhm.
And I am about to make a critique of Jack Kirby, and that is that Fourth World, at the end of the day, is a fun story, but it's not very good.
Mhm.
And here's why it's not very good. It's a comic.
Mhm.
Comics don't have to be perfect.
Right.
They just have to be engaging and tell a story. There are bad panels. Jack Kirby drew bad panels. Wally Wood drew bad panels. Steve
Right.
Ditko drew
Right.
bad panels.
Exactly.
Stan Lee wrote a lot of dialogue for really shitty panels.
Right. That's right.
There's bad points in every book. There's no thing that's perfect.
Right.
Every comic's going to have flaws. But the thing about all those comics is they showed up every month.
Right.
You could go, or every bi-month, man. In some of these cases,
Yeah.
you could go and you could grab a book by those guys, and it was consistent.
Right.
And the story moved you forward. The story moved
Right.
you forward. Nobody keeps on buying a book for the great art.
Right. So that's
Great
true.
art sells a couple of books. Great art does not sell a series of books. Story sells a series of books. Be a great storyteller. You can have a couple of bad panels. You don't have
Right.
to spend 3 days on one page. Jack Kirby certainly didn't. Jack Kirby was doing a lot of pages every
Yeah.
day. Steranko was doing a lot of pages every day. And Steranko left the industry because he got bored with it. Because that's what, in my opinion, good storytelling artists do, is they move on to other things,
Yeah.
as Guy has done here.
Right.
I mean, look at what he's given us, and we're only, 1/3 into this,
Right.
the Marquis.
Right.
And he's probably never going to do comics again because he's
Yeah.
elevated himself. Like I said, Trent Cayuga, again, elevated himself. He got pulled up into a different world where there's more money. Will some of these guys do books again? Will Guy Davis do a book again? You know what? I'd like to think so,
Me
just
too.
because he tends to be that kind of an artist that has something to say and seems to really appreciate the medium. But all that being said, going back to Rex Mundi, there's no perfect book, my friend, but Rex
Yeah.
Mundi is certainly worth a read.
Thank
It's definitely heavily influenced by this. And at least I'd like to think so. I'm drawing a connection. Maybe I'm wrong. But
It's funny. I think it came out probably around the same time. He did the first Marquis, I think, in 1997. It's so funny. I didn't really get into comics until I started writing Rex Mundi, so I probably wasn't even aware of Guy Davis at the time. I wasn't aware of anything about Image Comics or any of this stuff. My first year at San Diego, I was next to Rob Liefeld, and I had no idea who he was or the history behind him. I knew nothing about Image Comics.
he
practically
ruined
nothing.
Hawk and Dove. That's all
Yeah,
you need
okay.
to know about
Okay, okay.
Rob Liefeld.
Okay.
He ruined Hawk and Dove and is really good at drawing pouches. So.
Okay. Yeah. One thing, maybe a good little send off. Guy David, I could show a little pinup that he did for Rex Mundi right as it started to go. If I could share my screen.
Yeah, for sure, man.
Okay. Share screen. Okay. Window right here.
There we go.
Okay. So that's Guy Davis. So he was already, a very well established comic artist at this time. I was, Rex Mundi had just started. He didn't really know who I was, but he said, yeah, sure, I'd love to do a pinup. And then look at the time he put into this. I mean, he could have just done the figures in the foreground and be done with it, but all that architecture he did in the background, and to me, that's the kind of guy that Guy Davis is. He took his time with this. He made an absolutely brilliant piece of art that's really detailed. It really captures the flavor of Rex Mundi really, really brilliantly. Like you said, a lot of similarities with the Marquis. And this is one of my favorite pieces of art that ever came out of Rex Mundi. So I just immensely appreciate him doing it.
No, that's a fantastic piece. What I love about this is there's so much. If you look at what he was doing with the Marquis, you see an evolution of style. He's understanding, and this is. I feel like there's a little bit of Mike Mignola coming through in this too, because you get the overinflated sense of the jacket on your main character, and then the thin nature of the father in the background. And then the over-encompassing weight of the primary character in the immediate background. That's what I love about Guy is it's like as you move through, you see these influences really play. You don't see this kind of shadow work on him early.
That's
you
true.
see it after he started working with Mignola. And Mignola is famous for his heavy blacks on shadows. And if nobody's ever checked it out, absolutely check out Fafford and the Grey Mouser, drawn by Mike Mignola.
Right. Sorry,
sorry,
Snuggy said some Liefeld too. No feet.
Some Liefeld too. What?
No feet.
No feet. Oh my gosh.
His feet aren't that bad too either. They look okay. I mean, I don't know. I think he just feet okay. I guess. I don't know why he's so hung up on it. But yeah, one of my favorite things about this piece is the nervousness in the main characters. You can see their faces without the masks on. That was he really captured something about the characters. That was something I always tried to forward, and Rex Mundi was making the main characters feel very vulnerable and afraid. So he captured that greatly. He did a good job.
Very good, man.
Yeah.
Well, I love it. Thanks for sharing that. On that note, we're gonna have you back, Arvid, because we didn't even really get a third of the way through the book. So
I could talk about the Marquis for hours.
No, man, I look forward to it. I think we're gonna have another discussion. We're gonna have to make this a multi-part series where we're talking about Guy Davis's The Marquis. Hopefully we touched a couple of hearts and somebody's going to go out and check this out because, one of the things that I love about doing this is being able to talk about books that are absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
And the great thing about this scene is as more and more people, listen and view things that aren't normal comic fans, they start to understand what's a value for your dollar. And when you talk about a book like The Marquis, I mean, you can get this. This is over a couple hundred pages, and it's $20. So, and you can get it on the used market even less. So, absolutely check it out. Check out Rex Mundi. If you look at the description in this video, you will find links for Arvid on Twitter, Arvid on YouTube. You will find links for Michael Ogden on Twitter and YouTube as well. He was unable to join us. He was going to be our special guest host this evening. You can also find a link for the Gutter Backup channel where all previous episodes are available for your perusal. But on that note, and something I don't normally do, but I'll do it on this occasion, is I will give the last word to my guest. By all means, Arvid, close us out.
Yeah, all this. Yeah, thanks for having me on. This is a real treat. I don't know what to say other than that. Much appreciated. To be continued. I look forward to talking about it some more.
Awesome. From the Gutter, thanks for joining us.
Hail,
This is blood for blood and by the gallons. This is the old days and the bad days, the all or nothing days. They're back. There's no choices left.
You're still here? It's over. Go home.